Hi, this is Jack Stanley, and I wanted to talk about sound recording. You know, I talk a lot about it here, and I record a lot of things. I wanted to perhaps talk a little bit about what is sound recording and the amazing aspects of sound recording. You know, sound recording is a relatively new thing. I mean, it fits within the scope almost of human memory. Granted, it goes back a little bit before human memory, but not too far if you think about it. Now, my grandfather was born in 1884, and that's, 132 years ago. And, of course, in 1884, there was nothing in the way of sound recording. Granted, the phonograph had been invented, and Bell and Tinter were doing their research, but was there a phonograph industry or recording? No, of course not. There was nothing of the sort. It wasn't until basically the late 1880s to the early 1890s that a rudimentary recording system started. It was very simple, very primitive, but still it was the beginnings of recording sound. You know, there's so many aspects of sound recording that hardly get mentioned, and really should, because when we talk about history, there perhaps is nothing more fascinating than a document that is a sound recording. Think about it. There is no greater document than a sound recording. Now, I can read the writings and the speeches and the papers of Abraham Lincoln, and I can understand Lincoln, but I can never get the essence of Lincoln because I can't hear him. I can't understand how he says the words. That is so important. We don't realize that. We don't realize how important it is how somebody says something. I can say things in many different ways, and they can have many different meanings. You know, with our history, with the founding of this country, you know, that's only 240 years ago, 1776. I'm making this recording in 2016. As soon as I finish, this recording will be history. And it won't be of the age, it'll be of the past, which is what all recording is. Can you imagine hearing the voices of Washington, or Adams, or Jefferson? Probably Jefferson wouldn't have made a recording because he didn't like to talk. He was known as the red-headed tombstone. But the thing is that, can you imagine hearing the voice of Thomas Paine? Can you imagine of hearing Benjamin Franklin? Or can you just imagine hearing Lincoln? Now, of course, Lincoln was famous for having a squeaky high voice. I don't think it was very much like it was in the movie. I think it was a little bit more extreme than that, but you don't dare make it more extreme because it won't fit with what the public persona is. At least we put him in the tenor range because we know he was a tenor. He wasn't a bass. But think about how sound recording has changed the world. It was perhaps the first adventure in immortality. And what do I mean by that is that when people lived years ago, when people died years ago, what they said, what they wrote was of history. And people could say, I remember hearing him, but they could never quite tell you what exactly it was like. With sound recording, we have our first sense of immortality. Now, of course, the immortality only lasts as long as the instrument in which they recorded on lasts. I often dream and think of what the world will be like in the future. What would it be like to be a fly on the wall, 500 years from now, if man still exists, and we listen to 500 years, or nearly 600 years at that point, of sound recording, we will have our various dictators, our various presidents, our various leaders of countries. We'll hear former people who were presidents of the United States. Probably within 500 years, there won't be a United States. There'll be something else, because republics don't last. We all know that. But think about the treasury of sound. And that is what's so important about sound recording. It is the closest thing from its inception and making a permanent recording to a time machine. You know, it's really incredible if you think about it. I can hear the sounds of 1888, 1889, 1890. I can listen to great actors like Joseph Jefferson, who died in 1905. That's 111 years ago. That's longer than human memory. I can hear the voice of Edwin Booth on a cylinder. I can hear the voice of Benjamin Harrison. There are no other presidents of that era on record. I'm sorry to tell you, the recording of Grover Cleveland is not Grover Cleveland. The recording of William McKinley is not William McKinley. But the recordings of Theodore Roosevelt, William Howard Taft, and Woodrow Wilson and the like are who they say they are. But even still, think about it. I remember I did a kind of an interesting thing when I made a recording on cylinder of President Gerald R. Ford. I met with the president in November of, it was December, sorry. December of 1999. That's 17 years ago, almost now. And of course, memories fail a little bit and dates kind of fade. But I remember making the recordings, making 3 recordings. And also, at that recording session, making these recordings and telling the president that he was the first individual who had been president to make a recording in that fashion since Theodore Roosevelt. He was pretty impressed by that. And then I played a cylinder of President Theodore Roosevelt and let the 26th President of the United States talk to the 38th President of the United States. History gets no better than that. That was a special moment in time. It's a long time ago. It's history now. But that is what recording is. It is the capturing of time, the capturing of sound, the capturing of history. And those of us who collect recordings, we have a tendency to love these devices, these machines and the records, but sometimes we fail to realize the importance of the documents of which we are holding. We need to preserve them, to protect them for future generations, so that classroom of students 500 years from now, or 600 years from now, can hear the sounds of today. That is what sound recording is all about. And that is what sound recording is the great beneficiary to mankind. Because we can share time with our great-great-grandparents. And truly, you and I can share time with our great-great-grandchildren and those that follow. That is the wonder of recorded sound. And I hope you think about it a little bit, because it is an important invention, an important part of man, and is truly mankind's legacy. So remember that. Thank you very much.